As a leader, there's no better feeling for me than to be able to create opportunities for that next 7 generations and then inspire them to do great things. Money doesn't motivate me. Helping people is my passion and my motivation, and it comes from deep within my heart because I did not have much. You could see the dirt through the slats of my home place. And money will never change me. Never change me. Helping people and watching them grow and do great things is what wakes me up every morning. So when people hear these things that they get these grants, but they don't pay taxes, that is not the truth.
Alrighty, welcome in. Alabama Politics this week. Josh Moon and
David Person.
How are you, David?
Feeling good today, man. How about you?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. I feel like we've been doing this for an hour already. Which of course we have, and we got quite a nice little treat for you. We have Stephanie Bryan. She's the CEO and tribal chair of the Poarch Creeks, and she's going to come on for an extended interview, which I think a lot of people will enjoy. You don't often get to hear from her and her ideas and things that are going on, and I think it's something that some people will want to hear, the things that about the tribe and stuff. And I think it's a good story, and we appreciate them. And I'll tell you now, it's Wind Creek Hospitality is a primary sponsor here for us, and we really appreciate them coming on board. I think they've been on board now about a year and a half or so. Yeah, something like about a year and a half, I guess it's been. And, as you can tell, nothing's changed about the show. And, honestly, I think we had Arthur on twice. And I think one of them was Arthur and Jay Doris, who run the gaming. We had them on twice before they sponsored, well before they sponsored. And then we've had Arthur on, I think, one time since then. And now we're going to have Stephanie on. And that has been the only real influence. And honest to God, I had to beg Stephanie to come on. I mean, I had to, we had to talk about this thing forever before she would do it. But we appreciate them. We appreciate what they've done. I wish y'all would go by and see the places. You don't have to gamble to go by there if you don't want to. There's plenty of things to do, plenty of places to eat. Go to the pool, go to the spa, go to the restaurants, go just have a good time around there. And you won't regret it. They're in Wetumpka, they're in Atmore, they're in Montgomery. Visit one of them. Look them up online, Wind Creek Hospitality, and go and visit like David and I have. And I'm telling you, you're going to be impressed. You won't believe that it's in Alabama. It's a very, very nice place. So, all right. So, anything been happening nationally or anything in the last week or so? Our idiot got us into a war, temporarily at least, and which is exactly what he promised he was going to do, or the opposite of that. But it doesn't matter. Yeah. Nothing matters. Nothing matters anymore. Whatever he said he was going to do that he doesn't do, and then they explain it away because they're a cult. And honest to God, man, I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like this ability that these Trump people have. Why do you think it is, Dave? I struggle with this. Like, for example, he campaigned on, Kamala's going to get us into a war, and I'm not going to do war. I'm going to end wars. And then, less than 6 months, he's broken this promise and several others that he's also about, a big one is what immigrants he was going to be locking up. We're going after the criminals and the felons. We're not going after the regular folks out there that are working jobs. You got nothing to worry about. They're at Home Depot parking lots. They busted some folks in Mobile. I put it on Facebook yesterday. They went to a site where they're building a new school and harassed the shit out of the workers building the new $130 million high school down in Mobile. For what reason? What purpose? They're in 100-degree heat down there building a school, and you're over there just, come on, man. So what is it about Trump supporters and the MAGA folks that make it to where none of this shit sticks to him? Why is that?
Yeah, my feeling is that what he's accomplished, and I don't consider him an accomplished person. But I think he has accomplished this one thing. He really does understand human nature I think, better than perhaps we give him credit for. There was one of his former spokespeople, Stephanie, can't remember her last name. She spoke, I think, at the Democratic National Convention during the last election cycle. I think that's when it was. And she was, and she was explaining, basically why she left the Trump administration. And one of the things she said was, he told her, if you repeat a lie over and over, he said it doesn't matter what's true. You just repeat it over and over again, and people will believe it. I think he understands that there's this sort of baseline where you can deceive people, and especially if you have tapped into their fears, and that's the other part of what he does. He taps into the base fears of people related to immigration and immigrants, related to what's going to eventually happen in this country if population trends continue the way they are, which is that it will become a less white country. That's a fear that I think is at the root of the minds of many of his supporters. They're afraid of this. They're afraid of what that will mean, not just racially, but culturally. And so he has tapped into that. And I think because of that, in their minds, he can basically do no wrong. They'll wink and nod at just about anything he does because he is speaking to them on these base level issues, and also because he knows that if he repeats a lie enough, people are just going to buy it.
I don't know, man. I think you're right about what you're saying. But I've never experienced in my life a politician who never gets punished for not telling the truth. I've never experienced that. I mean, I'm not talking about a little white lie or, a gray area lie kind of a thing, I'm talking about just a bald-faced absolute lie, just a complete and utter falsehood that he will utter and tell people these things. And I mean, he'll say things they're just off the wall nuts, I mean, it's just off the wall insanity, and nobody calls him on it. And I mean, liberals do, but I mean, nobody in the MAGA movement does.
Well, it's interesting. You think about, if you go back to, the term of Reagan, Ronald Reagan, and I think George W. Bush, those two in particular, for a lot of us, there were things that they said sometimes that we just thought were flat out untrue. But I think the difference is lying for them wasn't a pattern, and it wasn't as brazen. Right?
Yeah.
In fact, you might even argue that all presidents have told lies, at least in my lifetime. You might be able to make that case, but I don't think you can make the case that anybody has been more committed to lying and been more brazen about it than Trump.
No, and I'll say the difference to me is that most of them try to defend whatever it is they've said. If we say it's a lie, they'll say, well, no, if you look at X, Y, and Z, then you look, and then, M and O and all that, then it's, they try to defend what they've said. Trump doesn't even try. He doesn't even try. No. He just says it. He just says things. I mean, there was the things that he claims that he'll just start talking I was reminded the other day about the word grocery, and he was talking about this is discovering this word, and then he said yesterday,
that was crazy. Yeah,
they said yesterday that he made up the term peace through strength. Is I mean, no, you didn't. What are you talking about? And it's just but. Then you hear these people. That goes back
to Reagan, I think.
Yeah, it does. But you hear these people say, "Well, that's just Trump being Trump," And how do you get a pass for this? I don't. And the other thing that drives me insane is him. We learned about a bombing in Iran through social media. He put a post on social media.
Yeah.
I mean. I know he had a
No
thing
other
later.
president has done that.
I mean, it's just. I mean, I don't know, man. It makes me lose my mind sometimes. But and then obviously the whole thing was a lie. I mean, the whole deal was a lie. I mean, the bombing of why he did it, and they don't have nuclear weapons. They weren't close to a nuclear weapon. Our own people said they weren't. Tulsi Gabbard, his director of national intelligence, told everybody that they weren't close, and they're not. They're not. I've watched and read a bunch of stuff over the last few weeks. I wrote some stuff over the weekend after this because I wanted to know. I went to the sources of people who are uninterested in our position, uninterested in Iran's position. They have no real interest in this. And I just wanted to know what those people said, who had worked with various nuclear regulatory agencies around the world, international agencies and stuff, and what they said about what was going on. Iran was not close to this. They don't have the basic capabilities to create a nuclear weapon. And listen, I am certainly, I think we've all learned, not a mathematician, nor am I a scientist. Okay. We know this for a fact. All right. And so I'm not going to pretend to tell you that I know when you say enriched uranium, I don't even know what that means. Okay. I don't know what enriched from unenriched uranium means. Okay. I have no idea. Or maybe there's maybe there's a poor uranium. I don't know. There could be. I don't know. And so, but I'm going to tell you that whatever the case may be, these folks said Iran had given up their stockpile of the uranium that they required to build a nuclear weapon. In addition to that, even if they were able to come back and obtain some portion of this, they would not be able to build a bomb that was deliverable in any way, shape, or form, even to get it to Israel. It would take them more than a year to acquire the materials and practicing the methods that they would need to build this bomb to be able to deliver it in a way that would cause destruction and damage to any country in their general area, much less here. And so honestly, there was I dislike Piers Morgan a lot. But I will say a lot of times I'll catch little clips of his show where he'll have 3 or 4 people on, and they'll be having like a debate back and forth, and he gives each person, and they're from different points of view and stuff. And he had one of these people on who was an expert in this, and he talked about the realities of this thing, and it was just it was. It was clear this man knew what he was talking about. It was clear because he talked much more eloquently about it than I ever will, and knew the science of what was going on, and how the differences in nuclear energy and nuclear weaponry and the differences that exist within nuclear weaponry, and how they are delivered and how you have to build it and what would have to happen. And he just said, this is foolishness. This is everybody who knows what's going on knows that this is foolishness, and he's relying on the fact that nobody knows this. The general public has no clue what's going on, and not to mention the bombing. It bombed 2 sites where we knew none of they were not creating nuclear weapons. They were only for nuclear energy. And he bombed the 3rd one that could have been used for nuclear weaponry, but it's basically impenetrable. You couldn't hurt it. And they didn't. They said it might have set it back a couple of months. Yeah.
Deep underground, as I understand,
yes.
Right?
Yeah. And so it was, and for what? And for what purpose? What are we doing here? Listen, I get the conflict between Israel and Iran, and I will say, I think Trump did say something. He uttered some truth. Dropped an F-bomb while doing it, but he uttered some truth when he said these 2 countries have been fighting so long they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Okay,
that's what he said.
And I gotta say, I agree with that.
I do too.
I agree with that completely.
Yeah,
and I think for the first time, Trump maybe got a taste of the frustration that has come from so many presidents in trying to navigate this. And, you would like to think, just get your thoughts on this. You would like to think that dealing with that frustration and witnessing the videos of people at weddings dancing as bombs explode in the air above them, which is just nuts to me, to watch this go on above them, literally bombs exploding in the air above them as they're at the wedding dancing, and they're just doing it like it's an everyday thing because it is. You would like to think that atmosphere and that sort of craziness would lead people to have a better appreciation and understanding for the freedom of religion that we enjoy in this country. Would you not?
Yeah.
I mean, why is it so hard now for people to draw that straight line?
Well, I think there are a lot of the people that seem to, I think that you're talking about, are people that are hearing from their preachers and pastors and evangelists, or whatever they call themselves, bishops, whatever they call themselves. They're hearing a very, I think, skewed view of the Bible when it comes to the role that Christianity is supposed to be playing as it relates to the state of Israel. I'm not talking about Jewish people, but the state of Israel, the government of Israel, and so they have come to believe that the United States has to play a certain role in global politics in order to protect the state of Israel for evangelical to achieve evangelical an evangelical vision. For this vision to play out, and there's a whole theology around the idea that the state of Israel is basically almost treated as sacrosanct, so that the end of time and the second coming of Jesus and all this kind of stuff can happen in a way that they believe is consistent with their understanding of the Bible. I think that's what a lot of that is rooted in, and of course not all of us Christians subscribe to that point of view, but there are millions who do.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I just got a bad problem with, honestly, I've got a bad problem with everything that has gone on in that particular region, especially recently. And listen, people probably get upset at me over this, but it's fine. I fought both for this. I understand what Hamas did, and it was terrible, and it was inexcusable, it should have been punished harshly, and it has been. But starving children to death is no better. Okay. Nope. It doesn't make you any better. You don't have a right to do it. There's nothing that you can use to justify it. There is absolutely no reasoning that you can put in front of me that I would say, okay, that's okay to do that. There's not. You could do it a different way. You could hold those people accountable. You could do things that let it be known that these things could not happen again. But to do it in the way that you've done it is despicable and horrible. And you should be ashamed of the way that those folks have been treated.
And I would also add that the general state of apartheid that exists in Gaza and in the Palestinian territory also should not be. Right. And that does not excuse what Hamas did, but I just think it's unfortunate, and I think it's really extremely problematic that our government has sort of looked the other way, not just with these current bombings and attacks that Israel has been executing, but has looked the other way for years, for decades, for the most part, as the Palestinian people have been subjected to what they've been subjected to. Jimmy Carter thought, God bless Jimmy Carter, may he rest in peace. He, with the Camp David Accords and then even subsequent efforts, even after he was no longer president, I think really has tried to help people to understand, that while Israel has a right to exist, and Israel certainly does, the Palestinian people also have a right to exist in peace, and both should be able to, under the right circumstances, both should be able to coexist in a way that would allow each to prosper and each to be safe. It shouldn't be that one entity is subjugating the other. Neither one, in either direction. But that's what we've had. And we've had that in part because, again, of, I think, the historic role of the United States foreign policy, and then the rise of this very, what I would call, militaristic sort of theology that has come out of, American evangelical Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Man. As a person who's not very religious, it 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 bothers me to no end. That what's the lack of respect for human life, the justification for absolutely atrocious behavior, the way people are so flippant with human life and human suffering in that particular region, based on just once you attach religion to it. And this is again, this goes back to our freedom of religion. Once you attach religion to them, then you believe you are justified for doing anything that you do, and that ultimately, even if you're killed in doing it, you're going to be okay. All right, and that's a dangerous road to go down. And I think we see the results of that. I don't know. It frustrates me so much over there to watch what's taking place, and look, I don't. The terror, I know a lot of that is rooted in religion as well, and and the attacks that we've suffered in this country and probably will in the future. It's and that is despicable and horrible as well. I'm not giving anybody a pass on any of these things. No. Okay, don't think I'm taking a side here. I'm not taking a side, because I think everybody has behaved particularly poorly. But what we've done in regards to Iran and entering that little fracas, I don't know that we put ourselves in a better position. I don't know that we did anything other than put our troops in that general area at risk, more so than they were. And we opened ourselves up, I think, to, some terror attacks and other things. Not that, they wasn't going to come anyway, but I think they're more likely now, as we've received the warnings from them. And I don't know what was gained. As we said, they couldn't hold a ceasefire for an hour. They couldn't hold a ceasefire for an hour. So I don't get it. But anyways, all right. Listen, because we're extended interview, we're going to be a little short in the opening today and in the close, and so we're going to slide out. We'll get to Stephanie Bryan here now and bring her in and talk to her for a while. And I hope everybody enjoys it. We certainly did,
me
and
too,
I think it's a pretty good interview. So, all right, we're going to slide out. It's Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. We're back in a minute. All righty, welcome back. It's Alabama Politics This Week, and David and I are happy now because we got a treat, because not many folks can say that they have hosted our next guest on their podcast or radio show or any sort of media outlet, because I know she kind of shies away from those things. Not because she can't do it. Just I don't honestly. I'll ask her in a second. I don't know why she shies away from it. Because it is Stephanie Bryan. She's the CEO and tribal chair of the Poarch Band of Creek Indians in the state, and at this point, probably one of the more powerful folks in the state, one of the folks who's done the most in the state. And I couldn't believe it when I looked around trying to find you, like previous interviews and things. We're so happy to have you. Why do you not do this very often, Stephanie?
Well, Josh, I will tell you, being the CEO and all the various places that we operate, sometimes my schedule's quite difficult. But I'm definitely not afraid to share the story of the Poarch Band of Creek Indians and all the great things that we're doing, not just for our community, but the entire state of Alabama. And I'm just not one that, is the person to boast and brag, but
Right.
I'm just honored that my people have believed in my leadership. And growing up in this community, a poverty-stricken community, and now to be a part of leadership that's driven us to prosperity, but yet we're still very humble people.
Mm-hmm.
As I oftentimes tell people, That's what happens when you have a vision and you work really hard. And I'm the leader that I like to get the work done and not boast and brag, but be very proud, not just for the Poarch Band of Creek Indians, but also the state of Alabama.
Yeah, I knew you weren't scared. I've seen you on the stage at the White House, and in a forum and things like that. So I know that this is, talking to David and I was, it's just it's nothing. I mean,
not that big a deal.
Yeah, we're chopped liver over here at this point. But listening to what you were saying there, I came down and went on a great tour, and I've talked about it a bunch of times on the program here. And David has been to the casino and stuff and resort in Wetumpka and had a tour as well and done some different things. I was struck by, you talked about the poverty from which, the Poarch Band, kind of suffered for a long number of years until things kind of took off. And I think Keith Martin, who took me on the tour for the most part when I was there, and was just fantastic. I mean, I don't know. Keith is, he's just, I know tour guide's not in his title, but it should be in his title because, man, he knows everything and he's such an engaging guy and so much fun to hang around. And he
should be your next guest. Josh,
listen,
he should be your next guest.
Yeah, he should be a permanent extra host is what Keith should be. I mean, listen, but I'm going to say this for y'all. I think one time on here and y'all wouldn't let him come back because some of the stories Keith tells, I don't know that he should tell some of the things he tells. But
he's definitely a straight shooter, and I will tell you this much: he's very passionate about our community and our growth.
Yes.
And so he likes to tell everybody he's the one that carried me on his back, or else he'd get a whipping if he didn't take care of me as we were growing up in this community, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, no,
but he also tell him that I'd whip all the boys too. So
yeah, he
tough
did.
Little girl.
Yeah, he did, and it was, it cracked me up. I mean, it's like a family. And I've said this a bunch of times. I mean, he referred to you every single time he talked about you as Step, and talked about the different things that y'all did when you were kids, and it really struck me as just this incredible kind of family atmosphere. And Keith even said this, this thing kind of took off like a rocket ship on us, and we were just holding on for the first few years. So I wanted to get your kind of perspective on that, from where y'all were to where you are now, and what that transition has been like from coming up as that little girl that was just playing around in the poverty-stricken tribe, and now to where things are, and what all the groups that you're part of, and going to the White House and all the different things.
Well, I'll tell you, Josh, Keith and I both were elected the same year, which was 2006. I became the vice chair by the flip of a coin, because at that time, the executive committee was elected from within the 9 members of tribal leadership. And so the first year I was elected, I became the vice chair as well. So at that time, we had grown, but not to the extent that we are today, definitely. Most people remember the Poarch Band of Creek Indians as a bingo field trailer with bingo machines, right? Mm-hmm. And you walk out and you smell like smoke. And at the time that in 2006, we decided to do some research and build facilities that were resort-type facilities. It was new for Keith and myself, and I will tell you, it was some scary moments, some tough decisions, but when we decided to build Wind Creek Atmore, really is when the trajectory totally went up. We were going to build Wind Creek Atmore and Wetumpka at the same time. And if you remember, the market crashed in 2007, 2008. So we just decided to build Wind Creek Atmore. We went on a road show for marketing, had no debt, really scared to place the tribe in any type of debt. But we felt like we had been successful with the modular buildings, with the sprung structures. And so at that time, we made the decision to build Wind Creek Atmore. That loan was for 7 years. We paid it off in 2 years and 9 months. And so, as they say, build it and they will come. But I will tell you, as a little girl growing up in this community, a very conservative community, a very strong faith-based community, if you would have ever told me that gaming would be our way out of poverty, I would have told you absolutely not. But a lot of our members, even today, we have probably more churches within a 5-mile radius of the reservation here than the average community within 5 miles have in their community. So we're a strong faith-based community, but at that moment, the trajectory upward was tremendous.
Yeah.
And we started reinvesting in our own government. As a little girl, I used to have my teeth cleaned in an Airstream bus that would come through the community. And with this success, we reinvested in our community and our members in their health care benefits. So we like to tell the story that we go from an Airstream bus to a state-of-the-art dental clinic where you can watch TV while you're getting your teeth cleaned. So which is a blessing to us, because we didn't have the basic essential needs growing up in this community. My home place is still here. My mom never would build a new home. She said that's where she was raised, right in the core of the Poarch Creek community. They used to call my mom's front porch Grand Central Station. So everybody asked, how are you in politics? And my grandfather back in the 60s, Dave Presley, was involved in leadership way back before federal recognition, way back before anyone even truly knew about Poarch Creek. And then my uncle, John Arthur McGee, he served on tribal council. He was known throughout the state as the Indian roasted corn man. I tell everybody he's the one that put Poarch on the map, because before federal recognition, he had Indian roasted corn, and he would travel to Birmingham, Huntsville, Mobile, to the Shrimp Festival in Gulf Shores, and everybody knew my Uncle John Arthur because his Indian roasted corn was so good. So good. So, but the journey has come with many, many challenges. And I remember the day as I was 15 years old. I worked for a job training program where the tribe received funding through through the state, through state funding. And worked in modular trailers that was right next door to my house at our powwow grounds, which is where we host our annual powwow and Thanksgiving celebration, which everyone can come and enjoy our native culture, our dancers in their regalia, the princess contest. And believe it or not, when you talk about me being on a podcast, growing up when I was a princess, I didn't want to go receive my crown. I wanted my sister to go receive my crown. That's how shy I was growing up as a person. But I guess the older I got, the more vocal I became. And when you're passionate about something and you have the knowledge, you're willing to share that with others, especially when you're helping improve the quality of life for people.
Yeah. Yeah, we looked back at so many different things when we were there. And we talked about the poverty, and we talked about the things that went on around the state and the injustices that had occurred that led to that poverty and things like that. But then we also talked about the amount of money and the amount of things that y'all do for the community around Atmore, the community in Wetumpka, and then places all around the state, and the amount of funding and the amount of charity projects y'all give to, the amount of things that you do for folks outside of the tribe. And it was why. I mean, for me, and I mean, maybe it's just me. Maybe I hold a grudge a little longer than some people. I don't know, but I mean, it just. I was just wondering how were you able to get past, I guess, some of that past history, and then to be so giving and to give things out like you do now? What drives y'all to do that?
Well, history is what it is. And, if you watch The Forgotten Creeks, that's a goal for me, is to never be forgotten again. And really those hardships and those trials and those things that our ancestors endured is truly what motivates me today. Is because, if we sit and we dwell on the past, we can't move forward in the future. We can't forget about the past.
Right.
And the roadmap that it took for us to get to where we are today. But that's just the type of people we are. That's why we're often known in Indian country as the friendly Creeks, is because we truly are humble people. With the prosperity, some people began to be arrogant. That is not the Poarch Creek Indians. I'll never forget the national news wanting to interview me whenever we gave to the victims of the tornado in Lee County, and all those people were killed. The national news was like, we want to do an interview. That's so kind of the tribe. We want the world to know. And I said, well, we didn't do it for the world to know. We done it because it was the right thing to do, because our heart hurt for those families who lost their loved ones and then could not bury them. So that is not the type of people that we are. We truly are humble people who are willing to give back. And I think a lot of times what happens is the misperception of truly who we are. And if we don't tell our story, others are not telling our story correctly. For many years, people would say, oh, you don't pay taxes. That is not true. We've paid billions of dollars in taxes. We've given billions of dollars away to charitable organizations to impact people's quality of life. And I think that the story has been for so long misconstrued of what we truly are as the Poarch Band of Creek Indians. But I will tell you, being raised as a very conservative woman, a child in a very conservative faith-based community, when I became the chair and CEO, I wanted to make it a top priority to work with Alabama, the legislators, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the governor, because what it takes is teamwork. It's not my way or no way, but what is the best way to develop good policy? It doesn't matter to me. I have great friends who are on the Democratic side. I have great friends on the Republican side. But how do we collectively come together to create good policy that drives for a brighter future for our future generations? As a leader, there's no better feeling for me than to be able to create opportunities for that next 7 generations and then inspire them to do great things. Money doesn't motivate me. Helping people is my passion and my motivation, and it comes from deep within my heart because I did not have much. You could see the dirt through the slats of my home place. And money will never change me. Never change me. Helping people and watching them grow and do great things is what wakes me up every morning. So when people hear these things that, oh, they get these grants, but they don't pay taxes, that is not the truth. At one point, in the tribe's career in federal recognition, we were totally funded by grant dollars. Totally funded. That's all we had. But that was the whole purpose of a federal recognition process. It's no different than a city, a municipality. But I will tell you today that around 90% of our budget that we operate is from revenues that we generate. And now around 10% of our budget comes from grant funding. Not many states, not many municipalities can say those type of statistics. So I'm proud to say that we've diversified our portfolio. As I stated earlier, it took my mom 5 years to even go to Wind Creek Atmore to have dinner at the fire. And boy, did I make a mistake, because then it's like, oh, let's just go have dinner at the fire, right? But her faith, she just said she would not go to Wind Creek Atmore. But when she saw the things that we were able to do with those revenues to build a state-of-the-art health care facility. I remember the days when my grandmother, after 3 months, because we were totally grant funded, she didn't know how she was going to get her prescriptions each month because the tribe
Wow.
was out of funding through IHS. And those days no longer exist. And so I just wish that our ancestors truly that suffered and endured all the racism that they did as the first Americans, the Native Americans, that they could really see, and I know that they do. They see us from above. They're here in spirit, and I'm always reminded that they're our loudest cheerleaders and thankful for the growth that we've had here, but yet we never forget where we come from, so we don't lose sight of where we're going to do great things.
Stephanie, that's such a powerful statement that you just made, and I'm really struck by the fact that while you have reminded us on this podcast that the Poarch Creek Band is a conservative Christian community, basically. Do you think that's a fair characterization? I mean, I think that's what I heard you say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You're a conservative Christian community, but you also, I think, espouse some ideas and embrace some principles that I don't always see with conservative Christians. And I'm speaking as a Christian. I'm a liberal Christian. I'm not a conservative Christian, but I am a devout Christian. And I like the fact that when I walked into the Wetumpka Casino, I saw an amazing array of diverse, people amongst your employees, very diverse. A racial diversity that I found to be, as a black man, I found to be very, very inspiring, and I was very impressed by that. So I want to talk a little bit, or ask you a question or two about this what I'm looking at as sort of a juxtaposition of conservative values, and then what I see with the Poarch Creek Band, which I find very impressive. My first question along that line is this. What is your guiding principle for hiring? Because, again, I did see a high level of diversity.
So I will tell you, most people do not know that less than 10% of our employees are tribal members. 90% are non-tribal. In the Wetumpka and Tallapoosa area, and right now it changes really regularly just because of the industry that we are in. It's a hospitality industry, and those numbers change. But the last I checked, in those areas, almost 50% of our employees are African American in Tallapoosa and Wetumpka. And you can interview any one of those employees, no matter their race, no matter their color, no matter their gender, no matter what, if they're a Democrat or Republican or an independent, they will tell you that we are one of the best employers in this state. That is one thing that we pride ourselves on, is taking care of our employees. They're part of our family. So race doesn't matter to us. People matter to us. We're all created equally. And to go back to the conservative, and you mentioning that you're liberal, I oftentimes tell people I'm really independent, and probably more independent because I believe in policy. I believe in working in a bipartisan way to create meaningful policy that creates economic development and opportunity for Alabamians. And so I really think that has been a part of the impact in my leadership role, is to build those relationships with Democrats, with Republicans, and figure out how we can compromise for the greater good of all Alabamians, for opportunity. Because I feel like if this younger generation, if we could instill in them the values, the morals that were instilled in us, too often you find kids that cannot have a conversation with you or I, and you're like, can you even have a conversation with the wall? Because growing up, we had to have conversation. We had no other choice. We didn't have social media. We didn't have a cell phone. And, I think it's important that you place these children in a diverse background with different people, no matter what communities that they come from, and you teach them how to work together. Because, there's so many times that we find ourselves, I oftentimes tell people it's not I, it's we. I have a great team, Poarch Band of Creek Indians. It's a team because I can't do anything by myself. Nothing. Other than, brush my teeth and, those types of things. But, when it comes to success is driven not alone, but together. And so you think about this younger generation, and when you put them in a setting in New York City from South Alabama, what's immediately someone may say, oh, where are you from? Oh, I'm from LA, but not Los Angeles. And sometimes children are intimidated. Even me as a individual early in my leadership career, I will tell you, I was in California and I served on the National Indian Gaming Working Group, and they asked me to speak on this panel. And I'll never forget these two attorneys from California was in the session. And after the session was over, they were like, wow, she's super intelligent, but I just don't know about that Southern accent. They didn't know that I heard them. So I go over and I tap the attorney on the shoulder and I said, just let me tell you, don't let this Southern accent fool you. Because when I set my mind to something, I'm a very strong woman to accomplish it. And the other attorney just looked at him and he said, I could just listen to you talk. But sometimes that intimidates people from our area. And I learned to overcome it because I am who I am. You're not changing me. And I truly think the diversity in having relationships with individuals, no matter their gender, their race, their beliefs, we're all human and we all should be who we want to be, but figure out how we collectively work together for the greater good of stronger, safer, educated communities with good health care, good infrastructure. And that's really what I try to promote every day. We bought 2 failing water systems in our community that services all nationalities, and they do not provide service to many of our tribal members, but we have upgraded those water systems because it's the right thing to do. And that's just an example of, it doesn't matter what community you live in. Some of my mom's best friends, you may know Mike Williams, who played for the Philadelphia Eagles, and his mom and my mom were best friends. They worked together for many years. We spent a lot of time growing up together, and a lot of people, was like, oh, wow, they truly are diverse. Doesn't matter the race. So, I feel like we're all created equally.
Yeah.
And we all may have different beliefs, but it doesn't make me, we can agree to disagree, but we're in a world right now that's the problem. I can agree to disagree with someone and really respect them. But that doesn't happen anymore. So when we agree to disagree and we show respect and then we compromise to accomplish, great things can happen.
That's
but
right.
The art of compromising sometimes gets lost. And I think that's why we can stay stagnant on issues. But I'm a firm believer in allowing the people to have voices.
Yes.
And I honestly believe the people of this state should have a voice in what determines their future.
Before I forget, I want to publicly thank you and the tribe, and especially Kay Simmons, your executive vice president and GM at the Wetumpka Casino, and also Kwesi Gilchrist for their support of the Alabama State Black Chamber of Commerce. I'm on the board of that Chamber of Commerce, and your support has been tremendous. And I actually got some really good feedback from our CEO, Jerry Mitchell, on the presentation I think that Kwesi did at our recent conference. I wasn't able to make the conference, but from what I was told, it was a tremendous presentation, and I just want to thank you all publicly for that, as well as the other support that you've given the chamber. And I want to ask you a second question along the lines of, again, the backdrop being this sort of idea that the Poarch Creek Band is a conservative Christian community. As you know, there's been a lot of opposition to gambling in the state of Alabama, and a lot of that opposition comes from the conservative Christian community. So what do you say to our fellow Christians? I'm not one of them, but to those who do have a problem with gambling, what do you say to those who do? Coming from this conservative Christian viewpoint that you have.
Okay, well, I'll share a story with you, and I hope that the people listening to this podcast will take this to heart, because I did when I don't gamble. Okay, so I don't gamble, but we can't legislate morality. But I had this conversation with my mom when we were in the process of expanding Wind Creek Atmore, and she doesn't gamble. And she reminded me, she said, I just don't feel comfortable. And I explained to my mom, I said, Mom, you and the ladies sit at the church, you make these beautiful quilts, and you come to me and you ask me to buy $500 worth of chances on that quilt. Said, Mom, I'm taking a chance. That I'm taking $500 chance that I'm going to win this beautiful quilt that I can display in my home. I said, can you explain to me the difference in someone walking in Wind Creek Atmore and taking a chance for entertainment? That's what they choose to do for entertainment. And she said, I can't make an argument with you. So I will tell you this. I think and we're in the process of doing due diligence, doing some pollings in the state. And if you go back and you look at the interviews that were conducted when we introduced a $1 billion plan to the legislator, a lot of the news outlets from Montgomery, Birmingham, Mobile, they went and interviewed a diverse group of people to say, what do you think about this? What do you think about gambling? And do you know the majority of those people were Christians? They didn't gamble. Some did gamble. Some said that they should have a right to vote. But the majority of the people said, if it's a way to create revenue and those revenues are leaving the state of Alabama and going to the bordering states and helping with scholarships and helping with infrastructure, better roads, better health care, you know what? I don't want you to raise my taxes in order for us to have those types of benefits. So if it's a way to generate revenue, we're okay with it. Just let us vote. So if people will do their homework and go back, and a lot of those people were conservative like our people in this community are. So regardless, if people are going to do it, they're going to do it. And so, other states are benefactors of what goes on that's made in the state of Alabama that travels to the bordering states. And so, one day we'll see how this happens and what transpires in the gambling world. Like I said, it doesn't, as a leader and placing something on the ballot, I told my constituents, I said, look, I don't support what's being placed on the ballot. I said, but I believe in your voice. I feel like you should have a right to say your vote means more to me than my vote. And a lot of times, some of those initiatives would not pass. Some did pass. So as a citizen of the state of Alabama and a constituent and a voter, I feel like it's the people's right to vote for what
Absolutely.
transpires in this world of gaming.
Absolutely.
And if it could ever just make it to the ballot, and, I served on the national level with the National Indian Gaming Working Group. I'm on numerous federal boards, and the knowledge that I have garnered from serving on those boards, one thing that Poarch Creek has done is our business model. We have done it. We've done it right. We follow regulations. We protect the integrity of gaming. You don't hear of corruption that takes place at Wind Creek facilities. So I think it's important for the people to know that we know how to do it. We know how to do it right. This business model has worked. It's helped us with our own government, and we're willing to do our part in this state as well.
Before I ask my final question, Stephanie, I just want to say to those who may not have picked up on it from things that Josh and I have said in the past, you don't have to be a gambler to enjoy your time at one of these resorts.
You really don't.
I had a great time in Wetumpka, during my visit where I spent 2 nights there, and I had a great time. And
we have a bowling alley, we have an arcade, we have a movie theater, we have a culinary school, we have a spa. So, there's so much to do other than that. And,
you guys have done a great job of making it a place that people can enjoy for a variety of reasons, not just gambling. Let me ask you one final question, Stephanie. Has there ever been, I'm sure there has, can you tell me what the economic impact is annually of the tribe in the state of Alabama? Can you tell me what kind of money is being generated, invested, what the economic impact is?
So in tourism alone, $4 billion in an economic impact annually. And we've had this study conducted numerous times. And really, it depends on what we are doing. This building I'm sitting in to host this to be on this podcast was being built during COVID. And I'll never forget a local store that did not have much traffic during COVID told me how much they appreciated the impact for their little country store, that they were able to survive through COVID because of the workers building this facility. So when we built this building, and the number seems to be $25 million investment, but that not only creates a building for us, but it also creates opportunity for a construction company, HVAC company, all these various trades, the brick that's on this building, these stores that they stop and have lunch at. Those numbers are hard to compound to give you a true economic impact study, because it's really difficult. But based on our investments, it's around a $4 billion economic impact annually. And I will tell you that around $1 billion probably just in salaries alone. Now, that's just in the state of Alabama. And the economic opportunities, employment opportunities that we've created is around 5,000 people. But when you look at the average household, and national statistics show that 2.5 is the average household. And if you look at that many employees times 2.5 and the impact that you're making on that many people's lives is tremendous. Not to talk about the 37 million that we have given to charitable organizations to help people, and especially during a time during COVID when there was no funding, there was no resources to help these charitable organizations, these schools, these hospitals. We were given $1 million. We gave $1,000 to the health board at the beginning of COVID to purchase refrigerators to store the COVID vaccine for these rural communities. So Scott Harris talked about that publicly, how much that meant to the entire state. But I think the point that people truly are missing is we have facilities in Pennsylvania, Illinois, South Florida, Aruba, Curacao. We have PCI federal contracting, I think, now in that portfolio that provides federal contracting jobs. We have in that portfolio now 19 businesses that are federal contracting businesses. It's not gaming. We have truly diversified our portfolio. When I became the chair and CEO in 2014, we had a visionary workshop to talk about diversifying our portfolio outside of gaming. But people were saying, oh, they're taking the money that they're making in the state and they're investing in Pennsylvania, which was not true. They want the debt. We would have gladly given them the debt, but we used our financial resources because we were not able to grow in the state to go other places and diversify our portfolio. But the point I want to make here for more people is those dollars come back to this state. Those dollars come back to this state for us to reinvest in the state of Alabama. So we not only take care of those communities in Pennsylvania, Aruba, Curacao, South Florida, we take care of those communities, but the revenue that we generate off of those facilities come back to Atmore, Alabama.
Yeah.
And that's the point we tried to make last year, is to be able to make the money in the state, keep the money in the state, and be a driving force in this state for the people of this state.
Yeah, just listening, I think one of the things that David and I both probably heard here is that we really need to get more exposure on those Aruba and Curacao facilities, and we ought to just go to the podcast and go on down to those places and spend just some time,
Well, we can actually host a show like, I'm a big fan, or was a big fan, of Kathy Lee and Hoda. And, when they would host their shows from various tropical locations.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what we need to do.
Maybe we should host a podcast and let Alabamians see truly how beautiful Aruba and the private island is.
Yeah, exactly. Hey,
I love this idea.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I listened to you talk about the PCI Federal Services. It reminded me, there was one of the things I did want to ask, because also, speaking of Keith, that I said Keith was such a great guy. I also met Mal McGee over at PCI Federal Services, who is quite a character himself, and loved Mal. But I was not aware. When I walked in for that tour, I had no idea that PCI Federal Services existed, and I learned quickly about the contracts the tribe has with the U.S. government, with the Army, with the
NASA.
NASA,
Department
Disney
of Defense
partnership. It's just, they're in countries all over to clean landing sites for some of the most expensive helicopters in the world. It was really remarkable, how y'all have branched out, and I want to say done so in a fairly short period of time. I know that obviously y'all been around for a long time, but I think when you really started focusing on those federal contracts, y'all have been able to expand that business in a really short period of time.
Well, I will tell you that business expanded tremendously during COVID. We closed down every facility that we had, and it was a challenging moment, and a lot of worry on these little shoulders that I was carrying, because we were paying every employee, even though all of our facilities were closed. We had no revenue coming in from those facilities, but we were still paying their salary, their insurance, their 401k. But what a lot of people did not know, the federal contracting services we were growing that part of our portfolio tremendously because the government Department of Defense never shut down. So we received a lot of contracts and made a lot of acquisitions to acquire companies through PCI Federal Services at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have truly financially, we were financially stable because we had a rainy day fund and we had funding that we could grow where something else was growing from an economic development standpoint.
Right.
So we were able to grow that arm of the Poarch Band of Creek Indians during a time that everybody of the uncertainties of COVID and what our outcomes were going to look like.
Right.
And also we invested in a company called Aero Equity based out of Boca Raton. And a lot of people do not know that a part of that investment portfolio and the owners of Aero Equity purchased the 2 million square foot building in the Muscle Shoals area from the RSA group. And our plan working with Aero Equity is to bring companies like Firefly, who is based out of Texas, to that Shoals area for production and more production. They're behind on production of space rocket missiles, various things. So we are looking at that for another opportunity in the Shoals area. So we constantly strive to diversify our portfolio. I'll never forget my grandmother growing up. She always said, never put all your eggs in one basket.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where we are here at Poarch Creek Indians and why we diversified our portfolio. Because at one point in time, our sole resource was strictly in gaming, and now it is not. Our federal contracting is doing extremely well. We opened a new office in March in Reston, Virginia for federal contracting. So the feeling that I had as the driver pulled up at our PCI Federal Services building in Reston, Virginia, when I spoke for the ribbon cutting, I told him, I said, as a little girl, I had no clue I couldn't even say Virginia. And so, those are just some things and positive things and impacts. But what we do there ultimately, and the revenue that we generate from those contracts, comes back to the state of Alabama.
Yeah, that's exactly that was the point I was going to make. It is all of that. I mean, people don't realize it, but all of that is first of all, it's taxed fully, and all of it comes back to the state. It's all, employees are employed here. They pay the taxes as well. You pay the payroll taxes, taxes on all the things that are done. And so that's outside of the realm of gaming and stuff. And look, I know you've been with us for an extended period, and I don't want to, I know you're busy. And so I just want to, but I do want to ask you one more thing, because I feel like I would regret it if we didn't. And that, we've talked a lot about gaming in the past, and I wanted to kind of focus this on something other than gaming. I think we've done that for the most part. But when you look now at what's kind of gone on with gaming, and because I think that's been for better or worse, the connection that I think the Poarch Creeks have had with a lot of people in the state, whether it be lawmakers or voters or whoever. I think that's how a lot of people know you, is through the gaming issue. What has been the most frustrating aspect of that for you? And do you feel like we are on the verge of maybe getting over that hump and finally being able to do something in the world of gaming that opens us up and allows us to bring in the revenues and stuff and stop sending it out of state?
So, Josh, I will tell you that I've been dealing with this since 2006. And when I was elected as the vice chair, the ordinance said that I would be the chair of the Gaming Commission, which is a regulatory body which regulates gaming. And I will tell you that it's been very difficult, very challenging, And we stayed in our own lane in the very beginning of gaming for the Poarch Creek Indians. We remained on our trust property. We followed the federal regulations. We gave back to the state. We hired great employees. Our business model really is a business model that works. If you look at where we started, what we had as a community, and as I said, to go from an Airstream bus to create a 3 state-of-the-art gaming facilities. And when we do things, we do them right. And we take care of these properties. We reinvest in those properties because these are our people in this state going to visit. Our name are on those properties. So we value what they look like. And it's been quite frustrating for people to dismiss that fact that we are a part of this state. We're not separate from this state. And we want to do what we can within this state and do it right. And so people nationally can look and say, look what the state and the Poarch Band of Creek Indians done together for the greater good of the state of Alabama. And it's been frustrating for me. And I will tell you, I really, for a long time, because I was so focused as the CEO, the chair and CEO, and getting the organizational structure developed and the diversified portfolio to where we could diversify and where we could grow. Because at one point, the gaming became stagnant in the state of Alabama. And when there was no growth within the state, with legislation or anything like that, we had to think as visionary people to say, okay, we're stagnant. We can't grow. We can't continue to create an industry with economic development and opportunities. So now we're going to branch out into federal contracting, into Creek Indian Enterprise Development Authority, where we have 15 to 18 hotels in the hospitality industry, our gaming portfolio. We were one of the first tribes to actually purchase a casino that wasn't on trust property. It was a commercial casino. But the frustration, I guess, that I have is I'm a person who, my word is my bond.
Right.
And oftentimes I think people get caught up in a whole different set of details when it comes to comprehensive gaming package. And I do feel like this past year or the year before was very close. There were things that transpired. You can't change what happened in the past. All we can do is figure out how we navigate to move forward in the future. I do think that with the deficit that the state of Alabama faces, all the ARPA money's gone. I mean, unfortunately, the state, the legislators, the governor, they're going to have to look for ways to generate revenue.
Right.
When you have big companies that come in from abroad, in order to attract them, you give them land, you give them tax abatements, but in turn, they're going to employ people, right? So we have to figure out collectively in this gaming world, how do we make the money in the state, keep the money in the state, and we help this state financially build a stronger foundation of infrastructure, education, rural health care, safety in communities. We provide law enforcement to not just our community, but to Escambia County. If you ask Sheriff Heath Jackson, he will tell you we're one of his strongest supporters in Escambia County when it comes to helping protect citizens in the community.
Yeah.
So hopefully the legislators can have open dialogue and come to a conclusion of a comprehensive gaming package that benefits the entire state.
Yeah.
But we're no different than any other business, any other corporation or any other business. We have to fight to protect what we have built. But also, we know the mistakes that were made along the way. We know how to do it right. We feel like the model that we have would be great to help build this state, create revenue that can go to infrastructure, to better roads, better education, better health care, better workforce development. We're lacking in so many areas, but there is hope that we can eventually come to some type of resolution that it makes it to the ballot for the people of the state to vote, to have a vote, and their voice be heard.
Yeah.
So we're in the process of doing due diligence and some polling just to see where people are in the state and, get the feel of the support of a comprehensive gaming bill. But there were two words that really could make a difference, and that's the last and final with a state operator. And it's made in the state. You keep it in the state. You do not bring, someone from out of state. I've witnessed myself, because I served on the Gaming Commission on a regulatory board, and you hear about it all the time, of corruption in other jurisdictions. And we definitely don't want that in the state of Alabama. We want to make sure that we do it right. The model that we do generates the revenue for the state, but we do it correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the two things that have always befuddled me, even if we didn't necessarily agree on whatever the proposal was the idea that y'all were not supposed to fight for your business like every other business out there does, and that and fight for your position on things and protect what you have, and two, this idea that somehow if y'all got a contract, or you got the benefit of the legislation that goes through, that it would somehow be lesser. I'm like, really? Is it lesser in downtown Chicago, in south side of Chicago? Is it lesser in Pennsylvania? Is it lesser in all these places where they're building these world-class casinos and partnering with some of the most famous folks in the world out there? But listen, Stephanie, thank you.
We
so
want
much.
to partner with our state.
Yeah.
I assure you, I live in this state. My children live in this state. My grandchildren live in this state. And I'm very passionate about this state, as you can tell. I'm very passionate about the Poarch Band of Creek Indians and the leadership role. But it's not about it's about we as the state of Alabama. I want it to be a national model. I truly want Indian country to look and say, can you believe what the Poarch Band of Creek Indians, the only federally recognized tribe in the state of Alabama, what the Poarch Creek Indians in the state of Alabama done together, and see the results of the opportunities that we can create and the economic development that we can create collectively together. Yeah. That is a goal for me. It is my passion. It is my drive for the future generations. And I have to say, my son lives on the border of Alabama. He's on the Alabama-Florida line. So when I go to visit him and the Florida lottery is so high, all you see is the Alabama tags wrapped around the building to get Florida lottery tickets.
It's absolutely insane. But hey, thank you so much for spending the time with us today and doing this. I think it's great. I think people will really enjoy it and really enjoy getting to know you and kind of what the tribe is about and what you are about. And I think it will open some eyes to kind of what's going on and who people are really.
Well, before we close out, we are a family. We are a Creek family that we welcome people into our family, and we welcome each of you and all Alabamians to come visit the reservation, because every time someone leaves, if it's a CEO of a major company here in Alabama, or if it's, just an individual who loves history that stops by, they're just blown away at the transition of what the community used to look like and where we are today. And so we love to share our story of those humble beginnings with everyone, and we invite everyone to stop by and just see, and we welcome them to our Poarch Creek family.
Yeah, well, having done so, I would definitely encourage it. I would encourage you to go to the properties. I would encourage you to go to OWA Oa is great. My daughter still talks about it to this day. She still has the towels that she loves, and she talks about going back to Oa every time we drive by there. It's great. But listen, thank you again so much for what you do and what you've done for the state, and hopefully we can keep moving it forward. And we really do appreciate you spending the time with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and so nice to meet you, David.
Good to meet you too, Stephanie.
All right, that was Stephanie Bryan, CEO and chair of Poarch Creeks, and we're going to slide out to Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. We'll be back in just a moment. All righty, welcome back, Alabama Politics This Week. It was a good interview, right? It's
very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, she was great. I hate that she doesn't enjoy doing those interviews, because I thought she was good. She was good.
She was very good, and I'm glad that even though she's not a big fan of doing interviews, she gave us nearly an hour, and it was substantive.
Yeah, it was
very substantive.
I think people will learn a lot about them, and I think it'll change. It should change the way a lot of people think of the Poarch Creeks, and
I hope so.
I've told you before. I've fallen on the sword, so to speak, and told you I thought, when I went down for the tour and everything, it really changed the way that I looked at them, and it had, nothing has changed, financially at all. Okay. Right. Here, we were already a year into doing them sponsoring the podcast and stuff. Right. And nothing has changed. We're still making the same. And so, that doesn't change anything, but it really was eye-opening to me to see what they've done. And I'm going to write something about this very soon in relation to the Kids Count data book and how we've handled raising our children here so poorly, and what they've been able to do with their children on the reservation. And kind of compare and contrast what you can do when you actually devote the resources to the folks that need it, and put the money that you're making behind those folks. And, the people will say, well, they've got that gaming money. Well, yeah, we got tax money. We got a hell of a lot more tax money than they've got gaming money. I guarantee you that. So, that's, I hope what people can kind of see, and also, to understand that these are not just some alien group of people that are over there that, as she said, she sounds a whole lot like me talking, so, and so it's, and I get the same thing. And, I started to say, but I didn't want to interrupt her, that, when she was talking about going to these places and people, she, not thinking that she belonged, and then her voice and, the Southern accent and stuff, leading some people to believe she's not, as intelligent as she is. Barack Obama, was on one of I think it was the Pivot. That's the one with Ryan Clark, right? The Pivot
Ryan Clark does the Pivot.
Yeah. And they asked him a question about one of the things that he had learned, and his response to them was, I think, something that everybody should hear, because it's something that I've experienced as well. And it's that you belong at those tables. Don't ever think that you don't belong at those tables, that those people are more intelligent than you, that those people are more educated and more refined than you. They're not. He said, once you sit at those tables, he said, once you sit at those places and you go to those places, you learn very quickly that, hey, these people, they ain't all that. They're not, they're not, he said, he went to Harvard, and he expected to walk on the campus and be just overwhelmed by the knowledge and the smart people. And he's like, there's a lot of dummies at Harvard, there's a lot of dummies, and he said, a lot of really smart people, but a lot of dummies. Going to the U.S. Senate. There's a lot of dumb people in the Senate, and like everybody's represented, and it is so true, man. You think of these people that are in government, that you see in leadership positions, as these men of stature, men of whatever. No, they're not. They're just like you, but just like Obama said, they've had the exposure They've had the exposure to those rooms. They've been ingrained with the confidence to think that they belong there. And that's the only difference between them and you, is that they believe that they belong there and that they should do it. They're not smarter than you. They're not more intelligent than you. They can't do things that you can't do. Just get your ass up there and do it. And don't back down from that. And it's that those are the sorts of things I think, as Stephanie was talking, that I think that, she had learned, and that's what basically she was saying, that she does belong in those rooms, and that the Poarch Creeks are doing some great things. And we do appreciate them, for not just what they do here, but for, more importantly, for what they do for the rest of the state and what they have done. And, because it is very, very meaningful. Also little housekeeping. This will be our summer break coming up. We normally take one of those, and so we'll be off for a couple of weeks and back towards the end of July. And so we'll see y'all then. I hope y'all all have a fantastic 4th of July holiday, and maybe y'all can get to the beach or get somewhere. And listen, if you're on your way to the beach, remember, stop by at Atmore or Wetumpka and stay. Break up that stay if you're headed down to the coast.
You won't regret it.
Yeah. So. All right, right-wing nut, and then we'll get out of here. Our right-wing nut is Kat Cammack from Florida. She's a Florida state lawmaker, Republican, and she voted for the state's restrictive ban on abortions, and then she needed one. Kat, unfortunately, I hate to hear this. I sincerely hate to hear this. She had an ectopic pregnancy.
It's a horrible thing.
Year. Yeah, absolutely it is. I do. It's you do not wish it on her or anyone for that matter. And really, really sorry that she went through what she went through. But what she went through was exacerbated by the very legislation that she passed, because when she went to the hospital with this ectopic pregnancy that was killing her, the doctors didn't want to give her the medication that would have induced the abortion to rid her of the ectopic pregnancy and save her life. And the reason they did not want to give her that medicine is because of the 6-week abortion ban that she had helped to pass. So she tried pulling up the law on her phone to show it to the doctors. They were still worried. She tried calling the governor's office to get the governor's office to call. And now there is some reporting in here. It's not in the story that I read to David before we talked about this, that they did not say that the governor's office called, but I have seen reporting in here that said the governor's office actually called, someone from the governor's office actually called the hospital and told them that it was okay to give her the medication. And that was one of the things that helped lead them to ultimately, hours later, after she had suffered for some time, give her the medication required. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, an ectopic pregnancy is never going to be viable. Never. Ever, 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 ever. It's not going to happen. Okay? So there was no reason not to abort this fetus that was killing her. None whatsoever. It was never going to survive. It was not possible. And so all they did was allow, because of the laws that were passed and because of the fear of their laws. Now, she, of course, Kat blamed it not on herself. Of course, not on herself. It was left-wing fear-mongering that caused this. The left-wing fear-mongering. Not the threats to lock up doctors that they had passed into legislation, but the left-wing fear-mongering. That's what the problem was.
All the fear-mongering has been generated by people on the right, not the left. The people on the left we've just been responding to, as you said, the threats that have been made, in a variety of ways around this whole abortion debate, threatening doctors, threatening people that transport people. I mean, just, even in some cases, threatening mothers, saying that mothers ought to be arrested. Some people have been saying that, that's where the fear mongering comes from.
Some about our attorney general. Listen, it's like saying, hey, ICE is going out and arresting folks working at job sites and harassing the hell out of people working at job sites. And then somebody accusing you of fear-mongering because you're telling them what's happening at the job sites. This is exactly. All the left-wing people did was tell you, hey, this is what they just passed. You might want to be careful. And
this is what they're saying they're going to do. You know?
And
so that's where the issue is.
Wasn't it Idaho where a lady died it was somewhere around in there where a lady died with a pregnancy that was not viable, and they wouldn't operate on her. And she didn't die. I'm sorry. They refused to operate on her, and they transported her to another state. She almost died along the way. But they transported her to another state because they wouldn't do this. And a bunch of people talked about it. Is that fear mongering because we told you this happened? I mean, what?
Not at all.
I mean, it's
stating the facts.
But again, we're back to the Republican mindset on things now.
Mm-hmm.
It's never their fault.
Mm-hmm.
It's never their fault. They're like children. It's never their fault. It's never their responsibility. If it affects them negatively, it's always your fault. It's always something you did. It's never a consequence of their actions. It's never something that they need to take responsibility for. They didn't listen. COVID was only bad because they had to wear the mask, not because them not wearing the mask made it bad. Okay, that's the mindset. Yeah. That's the mindset of these people. And Kat Cammack nearly died out of this. I assume she nearly died. She was certainly suffered for longer than she should have. During a very unfortunate situation in her life. And again, the other thing that I don't want people to miss out of this is this. Kat Cammack wanted that baby. Okay? She wanted that baby. And this is one example. When people tell you that a number of the abortions that take place in this country are by people undergoing them who want those children, but they are in a medical emergency of some sort or in some sort of medical distress, and that's the reason that they have them. And now you've entered yourself in between those people and their doctors who can save their lives, who can prevent them from suffering, who can do a variety of different things to help ease their pain at a time when they should only be concerned about the fact that their family is not growing in the way that they wanted their family to grow. Mm-hmm. And you know what? You're an asshole for doing that. Okay. You're an asshole for entering yourself in the middle of that conversation and only serving to extend their pain, past that. And,
why is it the general public's business what goes on between a patient and her doctor? Yeah. Why is that? Why are people so comfortable inserting themselves in that process? They wouldn't tolerate it if it were them. They wouldn't want the general public being involved in their private medical decisions. So why are they so comfortable doing it to other people?
Well, I'll tell you the excuse. I've heard it. The excuse is, well, we're in here as the voice of the child. We're in here as the voice of the child of doing these things. Well, the doctor is the voice of the child. Okay. Nope. And the parent is the voice of the child.
Nobody can better advocate for that child than that mother and that father, first and foremost.
They know what is best.
And then secondly, like you said, it's the doctor.
Yes.
The doctor is automatically an advocate for the child as well.
Yeah. And
that's just bogus.
Yeah. And they also hit you with the bogus, the false things, just so, well, you're for abortions right up to the point of delivery. Is that what you're saying? And I've always told people, I'm for abortions for whenever they're needed. Okay.
Exactly.
And first of all, abortions past a certain point, when we talk about whatever we define late term abortion is, late term abortion, they make a minuscule number of abortions that are performed. It's like 0.01 or 0.001. It's a tiny number. And of those, almost every single one happens in the event of a medical emergency and what is ultimately a catastrophe for the person who is experiencing the abortion.
That's right.
All right? Yeah. It's a heartbreaking thing. You've gone through, look, I did it, 7 years ago. So I know you've gone through, I didn't have the baby, of course, but I went through it with my wife, but you've gone through doctor's visits and listening to the heartbeat, and just every single time that they put the little thing down there to hear the heartbeat, just going, beat, please beat, and you waited on that, and to now have something go wrong at the end at that and now you're here involved in that. I mean, stop being an asshole, people. I mean, really, stop being an asshole to people and be better and be kinder. Listen, take this time while we're away. Take this time while we're away to be better. All right. That's what you should do. So spend July being a little happier and a little nicer to everybody.
Yeah.
And
Eat some
maybe have some
gummies
fun.
or something, whatever it takes.
Yeah. Well,
Eat some
hell, you
gummies.
can't do that anymore.
I forgot. Yeah, that's right. I forgot.
Yeah. When we come back, we'll have some folks from the hemp industry, what's left of it in Alabama, to come on the show and talk to us again. And it's because it's just atrocious what's happened to those people as well. But hey, y'all have a fun couple of weeks here while we're out, and we'll be back in mid-July, late July or so, and we'll have some fun. Until then, y'all be safe out there.
Peace.